Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Adult Sunday School lesson for January the 18th, 2026. It's a wonderful New Testament lesson from the book of Mark entitled Tell of God's Mercy. This is another lesson in our Formations series study guide that we introduced for the first time this year. It's the same publisher as we had previously when we used the lectionary-based study guide, that is Smith and Helway's. But this study guide format is more devotional and focused on reflection and application. Generally, there are fewer verses of Scripture, and that's the case today. There are just a half dozen verses from the book of Mark, but maybe we can go into some detail that will get a new slant on the teaching. Really, this format calls for more in-person sharing and discussion. Since we can't do that on video format, I will just be hitting the highlights, and perhaps these lessons will be shorter than what we used to do when we had the lectionary-based study guide. Our unit is entitled Tell the World, and this is an appropriate series of lessons for the season right after Christmas, in which we are in the season of Epiphany, where we are proclaiming or telling the world of God's grace and celebrating Jesus' appearance as a blessing for all people. We've had a couple of lessons so far. All lessons in this unit have the word tell in them. Tell of God's salvation, tell of God's works, and today we are telling of God's mercy. One more. Next week we'll conclude the January series, but these lessons explore our role in showing God's grace to the whole world. And I hope that we may learn comfort and challenge that will draw us deeper into God's embrace as we consider the good news in the season of Epiphany. Epiphany celebrates the visit of the Magi and runs from January the 6th to Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent. It's quite a period of time, at least a couple of months, 2 or 3 months in which we are celebrating the appearance of the Lord into the world. Gospel of Mark is the first narrative gospel in the New Testament. Mark is also the shortest of the New Testament gospels. It dates from about 70 of the Common Era, most scholars think. That makes it the first of the narrative gospels. The other three appear later than 70. There were probably earlier collections of the sayings and parables of Jesus that circulated without being written down into a narrative format. Many of these would be shared mouth to mouth, person to person, because it was right after Jesus' appearance on the earth that it wasn't until people started dying off that the need for a written gospel appeared. And so Mark is the first New Testament evangelist to set Jesus' words into a story format. That's what I mean by narrative gospel. Many of the sayings of Jesus survived just as sayings, but Mark put the sayings into a story framework. And that's why it's so powerful and useful for us today. The Gospel of Mark is light on talk, heavy on action. You have the word straightway appears many times, so not a lot of wasted time or verbiage. Jesus is depicted as a man of action. There are two endings to the Gospel of Mark. The shorter version of the Gospel ends at chapter 16, verse 8, which ends with sort of the disciples and the witnesses to the resurrection fleeing in fear. But later, a longer version, a few verses was added that extends to chapter 16, verse 20, which brings to a more positive conclusion the events surrounding the resurrection. So, although in all fairness, I must say that the earliest manuscripts of the Gospel of Mark, these early manuscripts do not include the longer version. I want to mention our friend and commentator, Dr. Barclay, Bishop Barclay, whose commentaries I use when we have a New Testament lesson. But Bishop Barclay says Mark, the Gospel of Mark, is the most important gospel. Indeed, it is the most important book in the world because it is the earliest surviving account of the life and deeds of Jesus. High praise indeed from Bishop Barclay. If we look at the four New Testament evangelists, you can see that we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John depicted as human evangelists, but also shown in front of their symbol, which appears in many references, many works of art, many stained glass windows in churches and cathedrals. Matthew is a lion, Mark is a person, Luke is a sacrificial animal, and John is the high-flying eagle. So I like to keep in mind these symbols of the evangelists. And when we're dealing with Mark, we're dealing with a straightforward account of Jesus' power among people, and it's graphically, vividly displayed in our text today. When I use the word synoptic, it's a word that means same view. It means that Matthew, Mark, and Luke present the same view of Jesus, the same biographical outline, many similar events. There'll be some differences because each of these evangelists wanted to stress a different aspect of Jesus' ministry, but in some situations the same event is narrated 3 times, once each by each of the evangelists, which is in a completely different realm than John's gospel. That's why John is frequently depicted as a standalone gospel. It takes a different outline of Jesus' life and comments on it. One way that scholars have talked about these 4 gospels is to say that originally there was the sayings of Jesus summarized by the letter Q, or Kel, the German word for source, and Mark's gospel. And so Matthew and Luke then took Mark's gospel as their basic outline, and they added to it the sayings of Jesus that do not appear in Mark's gospel but do occur in Matthew and Luke. And then these latter evangelists added their own information that only they had access to. So that's how most people think about the differences and the similarities among these 3 synoptic gospels. Here we have a story of a sick man living among the tombs. Jesus comes ashore and he encounters a crazy person, a fearful person. The locals didn't want to have anything to do with him. He lived among the tombs and would frequently throw off his clothes and run around like a wild person. That's who Jesus encounters in our scripture today. Our text today is the latter half of an episode that begins in Mark 5:1, when Jesus travels into Gentile territory and meets a man possessed by demons. There's so many aspects to this story that we could spend hours talking about it, but we're going to focus only on a portion of the story today. This entire event is recorded in all three of the synoptic gospels, but Mark's account is the most vivid and detailed. Matthew, the Jewish evangelist, he abbreviates it. He's not that much interested, evidently, in the gospel going to the Gentiles, at least in the beginning of Jesus' ministry. So Matthew does not emphasize it in the same way Mark and Luke do. Luke, the Gentile, of course, is very interested in how the gospel came to be shared among the non-Jewish population. So Luke amplifies it a bit. So you can see that this story and the way it's presented in the New Testament neatly fits this two-source theory about how Matthew and Luke use Mark's gospel. So let us look at the scripture. Mark 5:14 through 20 says, "The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the man possessed by demons sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion, or the many demons, and they became frightened. Those who had seen what had happened to the man possessed by demons and to the swine reported it." That's a reference to the evil spirits, the legion of spirits going out from the man into the herd of pigs that were drowned. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. These are the local people who sometimes tolerated the crazy man, the man possessed by demons, but they begged Jesus to leave. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by the demons begged him that he might be with him. So you get two beggars there. The same word is used to describe those who are begging Jesus to get out of town and leave him alone. That's the very word that the man who had been possessed by the demons uses to beg Jesus that he might become a disciple or follower. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis, the 10 cities that is, how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. Wow, what a story in these 6 verses. Verses 14 through 17 show the swineherds give their version of what happened to the man and the pigs. They didn't see everything or understand everything. They were too afraid of what Jesus was doing and what the possessed man might do to them. So they're probably not the best objective reporters of what's happened. Neither these herdsmen nor the sick man are likely Jews. Probably all of these people in the lesson today would be Gentiles from this Decapolis, which means 10 cities. And these 10 cities were independent Greek cities, small gatherings, neither Roman nor Jewish, and they wanted to stay that way. They weren't interested in being a part of a bigger grouping, whether it was Roman or Jewish. So many people from the countryside came out to see all the hubbub that was occurring when Jesus healed this man possessed of demons, and all the pigs were sent away to drown. In their fear, the fleeing swineherds may not have understood the total situation, so they give their view of what happened, and It might not been exactly the way it occurred. But this man possessed by the evil spirit had it exorcised or pulled out of him by Jesus, and from the sick man into the pigs, fled into the pigs. It's not exactly stated per se that Jesus cast the evil spirit into the pigs. Some people take this to mean Jesus was anti-animals and he didn't care if he got rid of animals, but that's not the case. That's reading way beyond what's in the text. It doesn't say that Jesus infected the pigs with the man's demons, but it would be easy for onlookers to accuse Jesus of it, particularly if they were Gentiles prejudiced against Jews and wanted to get him out of the way, didn't want him hanging around where they lived. They were frightened to their core. So when we are in a state of fear, we're likely to say and do things that are not typical of us. Even the loss of the hogs was not as hard to believe as the change in the sick man. That's what they remember the most. This man who had previously terrified them, a wild man living among them, out of his mind, was changed so much that was the dominant image that they had in their hearts and minds, rather than the loss of the herd of pigs. Because here in Jesus they see something remarkable. Here in Jesus was present and awesome power that they did not understand. Jesus was Lord over the sick man and able to bring healing to situations that had confounded them for years. Had they not been so afraid, they might have attacked these Judean outsiders. That means Jesus and the disciples who had gone there. But as it was, they just begged Jesus to leave them alone. Get out of here. We don't understand what you're doing. The man coming to his senses frightens us, as does the loss of this herd, the pigs being drowned. And so just get out of here and leave us alone. We don't know how to handle or deal with this. So here is a map showing Decapolis, which is Gentile territory, the series of gatherings, neither Roman nor Jewish, which is outside Galilee, outside Jerusalem. Again, this is the gospel's first trip into non-Jewish territory, at least as it's presented in the book of Mark. Verses 18 to 20 detail the discussion between Jesus and the sick man, former sick man who's now healed. Notice the man begged Jesus. This is the same word used by the frightened citizens imploring Jesus to leave their country, leave him alone. This man is begging Jesus to be allowed to join the group of disciples. He clearly has a profound conversion experience, but Jesus refused the man's request and sent him home to tell his folks all that the Lord, and in this context, all that God had done for him. So he's not to join the traveling disciples, but he's to go home and be a witness and tell. I put these words in red because they seem to be the dominant verbs in this discussion. The man is begging Jesus, but Jesus sends him home with instructions to tell those who knew you once as a demon-possessed sick person, see how you have been healed and made whole by God. And that would be powerful advertisement or demonstration of God's presence on earth and Jesus' message. I noticed earlier, chapter 1, verse 44, Jesus told a healed man to tell no one this messianic secret. It's really strange to me that in some situations, some healing situations, early in the ministry, particularly among the Jewish followers or Jewish faith, Jesus doesn't want his messiahship known, so he tells them to be silent and not say anything. But here, as the gospel goes outside the Jewish faith to Gentiles, Jesus is okay with the gospel being advertised or told about. So it's a curious situation that sometimes Jesus says, tell no one, and other times he says, please do tell everyone. So please go away and leave us alone. Have you known people, when confronted by claims of the gospel, just want to be left alone? This speaks to my heart because I've seen many times people don't want to be bothered with the gospel, or they don't want their livelihood or their lifestyle to be uprooted or changed in any way by the claims of Jesus. In fact, it's easier for them just to say, get away, leave me alone. Just as these outsiders asked Jesus to leave. The focus of the story is not on the spread of Jesus' fame, but on the miracle itself and how powerful it was. Earlier in Mark's Gospel, we have Jesus' miraculous power over wind and nature, the nature miracles. Here we have demonstrated again Jesus' divine power over people, the healing miracles. So there are two categories of miracles in the life and ministry of Jesus that we could study in some detail at another time. In witnessing the healing of the possessed man, the disciples must have been filled deeper with awe, saying to one another, who is this? Thinking about Jesus, who these disciples are being instructed and learning the true nature of the gospel and Jesus' mission, that even demons and elemental powers obey him. So Jesus is no doubt using this as a learning episode for the disciples. Again, Bishop Barclay says, they begged Jesus to go away and not disturb their commerce. That is, the swineherds who saw what Jesus did. Bishop Barclay says, we can easily determine if a person's faith is real by seeing if they are willing to become poorer for it. And these people were not, so they just wanted to get Jesus out of there. So that's a true litmus test of our faith. If we are willing to become poorer because of it, because in the long run, because of our spiritual healing, we are blessed immeasurably more than we may experience otherwise. So what about us? Well, we can change the world by sharing with our families what Jesus has done for us. You know, we don't have to go on a missionary trip to be an example or to have an impact in mentioning the change in our life brought about by the Lord. Our families, near and far, can be a mission field for us. We can change someone else's world by showing kindness to them in their need. That's what Jesus was doing to this sick man possessed by demons. The experience of God's mercy requires action, going and telling. But we don't have to go around the world. We can start by telling those we live with and are associated with. So let's be quicker to stress God's mercy than to condemn those we regard as sinful. The man was running around frightening other people, not being useful to anyone. I'm certain that his lifestyle was condemned, but Jesus was quick to bring mercy and healing to that situation rather than to bring judgment and rejection. That's a good role for us, a good pattern for us to follow as well. So, for further study, please join a Sunday school class or other discussion group in order to add your comments and input. Classes are available here at First Baptist Middletown for every age group. I hope that you are a member of one or that you will join one. Thank you for joining me today. Don't take me too seriously, but please do take the Scripture seriously. It deserves our best efforts and more thought than I can possibly package in these few minutes. The lesson is presented only for interkingdom exhortation, has no commercial value or intent. Remember our prayer concerns, and I'll see you next week as we conclude our January study regarding telling of God's presence in the world. Again, thank you, Darrell Elster, our Minister of Education and Technology, for making these sessions possible. Until next week, I will say goodbye.